The organization was founded by Maxime Renaudin, who's our president, and he, in 2006, he was traveling in a country called Niger in Central Africa, and he was out there, and it was an area of land that was subject to desertification, which basically means it was an area where there once was forest, and it was cut down, and it dried up so much that it then became a desert. And he was really affected by this, and that's kind of how Tree Nation was originally born. And so, we can get into reforestation, and before that, I kind of want to talk about a bit about the problems of that. So, deforestation and desertification and the removal of forests poses a number of problems, and the most obvious ones are for the climate and for the wildlife and for the habitat. So, and the climate change, and then there are so many subsidiary issues that come with that. So you think about a healthy, thriving forest and what that entails. So you have good water supply, you have good biodiversity and eco activity, and you also have then rain. So forests produce and maintain rain and humidity in the air. And so what happened in this particular project in Africa was that, the forest was cut down, it was sold for timber, one-time only activity. And then after a number of years, what the local population found was that there was no water, and that meant that they couldn't grow crops and they couldn't feed their families. And so there are so many snowball effects that really affect deeply these communities and these areas of the world that do become deforested, and then kind of ripple effect all across the world. So yeah, that's important to understand the problems around deforestation, and yes, it does affect the climate, and yes, it does affect our rain patterns. It also affects the livelihood of local communities and food security, and so yeah, it's really deeply rooted in a lot of things that we don't really see on the surface, but that are intricately connected. And so that was kind of why Max founded Tree Nation, and since then it's been growing. And our mission is to reforest the world by planting trees, and so that is.
Hey, my love, I think you're cutting out a lot. In case I'm not the only, yeah, you're cutting out a lot. In case you want to turn off your video, maybe then we can hear your voice better. Because I didn't understand anything about how Tree Nation was basically like founded right now. That would be really amazing, because it was cracking out.
We got it.
Thank you, Pippa.
Forest.
Now we can see your screen, but no presentation. Yeah, there we go again. Perfect. Exactly. Yeah, I'm so sorry, guys. Yeah, the internet has been really bad. So if you can just repeat briefly what you were speaking about before, that we can connect the dots again. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, so I was basically just introducing Tree Nation and introducing some of the reasons why it was founded back in 2006. you know, there are many issues with deforestation, and you know, those most predominant are around climate change, and those that you don't necessarily see on the surface are the subsidiaries. So food security, because there's no the water level is low in those areas and the rain precipitation is low in those areas, has a really large and profound impact on the local communities, the livelihood of those people, and them being able to feed themselves, and of course also the wildlife. And so where you see areas of deforestation, the animals go away, and so you find that the eco density and the eco richness in those areas of the world dramatically reduces. So there's a lot of healthy information now around climate change and the effects of deforestation on climate change. And I think it's important to note that, of course, that is one of the fundamental impacts, and there are many more subsidiary impacts as well, and that are kind of some of the issues that we see when we see areas that are deforested. And that was the reason that Tree Nation was founded in 2006. And since then, we have created essentially a platform and a relationship. Now we have over 100 projects. 30 of those are live, and in terms of they are actually being actively funded. And we started to build a relationship with these projects. And so typically we'll go for the long-term projects, which means that, you know, they continue for years and years, and it provides us with some assurance and trust in those projects. And it also allows us to be able to have the conversation with our corporate sponsors and partners, that we're able to maintain this relationship. And so those projects are sponsored by VTS, CCB, Plan Viva, and Gold Standard. So they're the kind of CO2 certified projects. And then we work with lots of other non-certified projects as well. And so in terms of those projects, like I kind of mentioned, there are lots of elements to each of those projects. So yes, we're reforesting, but there's also we also work with students and volunteers. We also work on infrastructure within the local community. We also work, there's also some scientific research that are happening in those projects, and there are usually projects and initiatives around food security. So what you'll find is that typically within any of our projects, there'll be kind of 30 to 50 different species, and those will be based around on agroforestry principles, which means that there is an interest for that community to keep the project alive and maintain those trees once they've been planted, because they're productive. And being able to do that and have that close relationship with the projects allows us to have the transparency and quality that gives us our assurances to the people that we're working with, that these are really good quality projects that they can trust. So in regards to the way that we work with companies, what we provide to them is basically their own individual forest that relates to all of the planting activities that they are involved with globally on one of these currently 30 projects that we have available for them to sponsor. And in their own forest, it calculates and it counters the number of trees that they are planting, where in the world they are planting them, how much CO2 that it sequesters thanks to their contributions, and how many hectares of forest have been reforested thanks to that activity. And so this is a really good way for them to be able to have a conversation with their consumers and their customers and their audiences around what it is that they're doing. And so we provide a lot of statistics around that for our companies and our partners. There's also a lot of communication tools that we provide, and so that it just to aid that communication with their audiences. So of course it's about you know, reforestation, but it's also a lot about messaging and how do we have that conversation in the best way with their audiences, so that the audience can understand why this work is important. And to be able to do that, we provide different solutions and services to those companies. And so we started to design a lot of ways that, yes, you can plant trees, but you can also offer those trees to your customers. And what that means is that they then are engaged in this process and engaged in their sustainability journey and able to kind of open this tree as a gift to them and find out what project it's been planted on and what species has been planted for them, and all these like little details around how much CO2 has been sequestered, etc., so that they really get a feel for this work rather than it being kind of an etheric thing. We also designed pretty recently the ability to integrate using an API into any kind of internet website and online service. And so what that means is that any automatic transaction, so if you think of, for example, of a e-commerce shop and retailer, if you're buying clothes or if you're buying water bottles or whatever it is that you're buying online, we designed the API in our webhook so that any transaction online, it automatically triggers the planting of a tree for that particular retailer in their forest, and it sends that tree as a gift to their customers. We also work typically in kind of more traditionally, I would say, within CO2 offset. And so a lot of companies now have the objective to become CO2 neutral, carbon neutral. They have net zero targets. And so we provided an ability for them to be able to do that either through the work that they do with their teams, so kind of office travel, employee travel, the building that they have their offices, can all the cumulative carbon that is surrounding that can be offset, as can the product. So you typically, when you're manufacturing anything, there's a huge amount of carbon that's stored in the production of that product through manufacturing. And so a lot of companies now are starting to understand what are their scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 activities, scope 1, scope 2 being those direct activities that are related to them as a business, and scope 3 usually being their supply chain. So there's a large amount of work, especially for the bigger organizations, to understand what is their carbon footprint, and then having the ability to reduce that first of all, and also then compensate and offset that carbon activity through reforestation and conservation activities. So in terms of, I won't get too much into pricing, but we work with the projects to provide really fair pricing. And so what that means is that when we start a project, we pay the local communities to do the planting. So it's all kind of fair trade, ethical employment, and that's reflected in the pricing to our partners. And I kind of guess I'm going to end with how a brand can then replicate and expose themselves in the public sector as someone who is showing leadership in sustainability. So what we really want to see most of all is, these bigger brands taking those steps to become more sustainable, to get involved with reforestation, to make that part of their business operations and how they work as a standard, and show their leadership in really driving positive action towards climate change, environmental sustainability, for both human positive human benefit, and also for animals and for wildlife. And so we really help our organizations and partners that we work with to have that communication and show their leadership so that others can follow them in their actions. So I guess that's all that I have to say in terms of what we offer and services to companies and businesses around reforestation. And then, you know, if you want to find out more information specifically either about the projects and how we work with the projects and the relationship that we have with them, and what kind of planting actions we're taking, or if you are a business and you are interested in getting involved in those activities, then the best thing to do would be to reach out to me directly. I think that my details are on your data and information, but you can email me directly at philippa@tree-nation.com, or just access us on the website and mention that you saw this presentation from me, and then I can speak with you about what that means for you as an individual, what that means for you as a company.